This is Democracy Watch. Mark, supporters of a ballot measure to end gerrymandering in Ohio filed a lawsuit against Ohio Republicans this week. What's going on here?
Yeah, so Republicans have been insisting that they can gerrymander the state legislature and Congress in Ohio, and they have been shameless about it. Let's remember, these are the same folks who, passed gerrymandered maps in violation of the Ohio Constitution, kept having it struck down, and they just refused to yield. And so, in the end, they wound up sort of outweighting the court in this back and forth between striking down their maps. And so finally, a bunch of groups decided, let's pass a new reform ballot measure to make it clear that there will be a citizen commission and we won't have this kind of nonsense from Republicans again. And instead, what Frank LaRose produced, well, it's what you would expect. It is a bunch of misinformation and disinformation about what this ballot initiative would do. And that's the language he is trying to get placed on the ballot. It's quite Orwellian.
Wait, so how are Ohio election officials allowed to change the name and the description of a ballot measure before it gets to voters? Shouldn't the organizers that actually gathered the signatures to get something on the ballot be able to approve the language that people are going to vote on?
Yes. Yeah, right. That's the process, Brian. And in a normal system where you have good faith actors, that's what happens. Now, look, you always need the election officials to look over the language to make sure the language itself is not misleading, right? Because you wouldn't want, for example, an anti-abortion ballot measure to be on the ballot and described as being, pro-abortion, right? So there is a role for the election officials in this process to make sure that the description of effects, the language that describes what the ballot initiative will do, that language is accurate. But what we have here is Frank LaRose hijacking that process to literally reverse the language from being true to being a lie. So, for example, rather than the language saying this will combat gerrymandering, he literally changes this anti-gerrymandering ballot initiative to say it would be pro-gerrymandering. I mean, it is so shamelessly anti-democratic that you would think that by now Republicans would have reached the bottom of the barrel, but they keep finding a way to go lower.
Mark, Ohio has a reputation as a heavily gerrymandered state. Can you give us an overview of how Ohio's last redistricting process went and why a ballot measure like this would be so important for voters?
So look, no one's going to say that Ohio is exactly 50-50, but it's not far off. I mean, Sherrod Brown, who is a Democratic senator, is up for re-election. He is winning in all the polls. And though there is a Republican governor and a Republican senator, these are close competitive elections. And so, you might expect that in a 15-member delegation, it would be a congressional delegation. Maybe it would be 8-7 or 9-6. It is 10-5. Okay, that's how gerrymandered it is. 10-5. It is 2/3 Republican and 1/3 Democratic in Congress. And that is only because the Republicans couldn't find a way to gerrymander an additional district away from Democrats there. So it's a very gerrymandered state at the congressional level. Obviously, at the state legislative level, it is in some ways even more gerrymandered. So this is a very, very gerrymandered state. And if we had fair districts in Ohio, like I said, you would expect that it would probably be 8-7 or 9-6. And in a Congress that has such a slim margin between Democrats and Republicans, 2, 3, 4, 5 seats, literally this could be the difference between Democrats being in the majority or in the minority.
Well, we made a bunch of videos last year about how Ohio Republicans were using every trick in the book to try and stop a ballot measure to protect reproductive rights. And that ballot measure passed with overwhelming support last November. But now it seems like Ohio Republicans are running the same playbook with this anti-gerrymandering amendment. Shouldn't they be worried that voters are going to get sick of these right-wing politicians trying to prevent them from implementing popular policies through ballot measures?
One of the great tragedy of the Trump MAGA era is that Republicans have become totally disconnected from the normal shame that politicians feel when they so grossly overstep. I mean, you point out what happened last year with Republican tricks to stop the pro-abortion ballot measure. They tried moving the date. They tried changing the margin of how many votes you had to get in order for it to pass. I mean, they literally tried to rig democracy against that ballot measure, and they were defeated time and time again in court. I'm proud of the work that my law firm did in a number of those cases, and ultimately they lost. And yeah, I do think that they are starting to pay a penalty. I think they are starting to pay the price, and I think that they know that. And rather than trying to back away and say, okay, we'll adopt more sensible policies, we will adopt positions that are the majority position in the state or in the country, they are doubling down and they are tripling down. We see this in state after state, and they are taking their lead from Donald Trump, who is fighting against free and fair elections and against democracy. And unfortunately, you see spillover in situations like this.
Marc, let's finish off with this. Do you have any prediction as to what we're likely to see in Ohio as we get closer and closer to this ballot measure actually coming to pass?
Yeah, we are seeing Republicans get more and more desperate everywhere. We've talked a lot about how desperate they are to prevent free and fair elections and accurate certification in Georgia. We've talked about how they have gone all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to try to keep in place voter suppression laws in Arizona. We've talked about their litigation strategy in state after state to make it harder to vote and easier for them to cheat after the election. And this is of a part of that. They are worried about losing an opportunity in the Senate race in Ohio, where again, Democrat Sherrod Brown is still leading. They are worried about losing power through a fair districting process. And time again, when Republicans face these existential threats to their power by having there be free and fair elections with open processes, we see them get worse and worse. So that is what I expect this November. But I can promise everyone that we will be on the case and we will be fighting back.
All of which underscores, by the way, the need for people to support the work that you and your team are doing. So one small step that everybody watching right now can do is just to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the free news outlet you founded to focus on everything voting in elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you haven't yet signed up, trust me, it is an excellent resource and proves especially invaluable right now. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.